So we're going to talk about how to be a great committee member or chair and other tips for dealing with volunteers and diverse objectives. So I've got a couple different objectives for today. One is talking about the importance of goals to turn your committee into a team. Two is meeting tips and techniques to ensure time is well spent in those committee meetings or board meeting. And we're going to also look at exploring how to motivate the many different types of people to be engaged. And of course, as we go along, happy to answer any of your questions about getting things done. So why are goals so important? I don't know if you've heard this before, but there is a difference between groups and teams. So when we come together in our Rotary meeting, or when we come together today in the district assembly, we're a group. We're a group of people who share similar skills and interests and a passion for Rotary and all that Rotary does. And so that is, and so we're a group. But in order to become a team, you have to have two key characteristics in place. One is that you need a goal. And two is it has to be a goal that we have to work on interdependently to achieve. So it's one of the reasons why I often find in Rotary, some of the more effective committees are committees like fundraising, because they have very clear goal. We want to raise this much money, we want to sell this many tickets, and it has a goal that focuses everyone. I find that sometimes the board overall forgets to focus on all its goals, or some of the other committees, whether it's public image or it's international, etc., that they kind of just go on their ways, but they forget to have a goal. It is goals that motivate people. And so, you know, each year, every committee, if you're going to be a team, needs a goal, something that we're working on interdependently to achieve. So in public image, it could be saying we want to increase the number of followers following us on Facebook and Instagram. Why would you want to do that? Because then when you go to promote an event or a fundraiser or a bottle drive or whatever, that you have a lot more people that are going to get your messages. Or maybe it's the international service and it says we want to invest in one new project that we've never done before, as well as in total find the best way to use the $5,000 we've set aside for international service. Those are acceptable goals. Boards actually are, presidents and boards are actually asked to set goals. That's what we do through the Rotary Club Central, is that we ask clubs to set goals for the year. A membership goal, a foundation goal, there is, and the club citation is actually outlines a whole bunch of goals. You can choose from the 25 goals, the 13 or 14 you want to achieve. So it's actually all built in there in the structure, but I find many boards forget that. And on a good board, they actually have the goals are on the front page of the agenda, or on the back page of the agenda, or on page 2 of the agenda, that say, this is what we're here to do this year. And so let's stay focused and let's talk about our goals and what are we doing relative to them. So goals are a really effective technique for helping people have focus. And so, as I say, there are many different types of goals that you can have. You know, a number of new club members involved in planning the changeover event. A way to improve your club's retention rate, which you can get just right on all the reports that you can run through Rotary Club Central. You have a place on Rotary Club Central to say how many hours of volunteer time did our club give, and maybe your service group wants to try and increase that. So goals are truly one of the things that help you to get things done. And so I'm going to pause in a moment for some questions and comments about that. But, you know, so a good committee chair, make sure you have a goal, at least one, has a plan, but that everyone needs to have a part to play in the plan. So not everyone has to do everything, but, you know, and making sure that at the end of a committee meeting, et cetera, go around and everyone could ideally speak to one action they're going to take between now and the next meeting to help move the plan forward. And so, you know, with good committees, they also you know, say enter the goal into Rotary Club Central, but they have a plan. This is our written membership plan. This is our written public image plan. This is our written plan for youth services and how we're going to increase the number of people that are applying to us to go to Ryland Slap Shop, whatever it might be. And at some point at a club assembly, hopefully early into the year, you should be telling the whole club about the plan, so they know what you're doing and what is the actual plan that you are setting out to do. And ideally, as I say, maybe it's not every meeting, but making sure everyone has an action, something. You're going to call someone on this. You're going to create the flyer on that. And then one of the ways that a lot of tech companies operate is they actually operate on team accountability. So you have to, at the next club assembly, say it's in 6 months, talk about your progress. And so these are all the things we said we do. These are the things we have done. And these are the things we're going to do for the rest of the year. Being asked as a committee to be accountable for what you're trying to do is a great way to ensure things get done. And then one thing that I think is missed in a lot of clubs is June is a perfect month to actually have each committee report to the whole club what it accomplished in the year and what are some of its recommendations for the next year. Sometimes we get committees that just kind of go on and on and on year over year. And I kind of forget that it's such a nice chance to refresh. Do we have the right goals? You know, is it time to change up some of the committee membership? And also to report on it. So let me stop there and just take either questions and comments about setting goals, setting a plan, making things happen. Does anyone else have an example of a goal that they maybe set as a committee chair?
I can tell you as a new person, my frustrations.
Yes.
Okay. I see that Rotary has many goals. Sometimes I see that those goals are very well defined. There is a feasibility check. There is a check between a true need and a perceived need. Sometimes we think there's a need, but it turns out there really isn't an actual need. The other thing is sometimes the plans to follow through on the need and the goal are lacking in terms of direction and assigning or taking charge of something. And the third and the biggest one is that I find it difficult to find out what exactly is going on, who's doing it, where do we stand on something. There is no way to go back and check to see where everything's going on. So the reporting and keeping track of things I find very difficult.
I think that's great for everyone to hear as a new member is, you know, so they should be in your club documents. They should be posted so anyone can go in your club documents through Club Runner and see where things are at. And also, I'm just going to show you here briefly in my Rotary. You seeing my screen where it says my Rotary? Sign in. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, when you go in and you sign into my Rotary, and this is one, you know, Rotary International has actually come up with some great things. And now it's going to take a minute to go in. Here we go. So when you go in, and this is why it's so important that each committee put things in, is so my club's Rotary Hamilton AM, right here is view my club goals. And so I, as a member, have an expectation to not only be able to hear what my club is planning, so it should be filled out, goal center, but also all the updates should be there to tell us what we've done and the details and service and so forth. And a lot of club presidents and a lot of committee members don't do this, but that's the whole reason Rotary put it in place, is be transparent, be clear, tell people what we're trying to achieve and show people where we are against those things. Our president is very good about doing this. And so he has all these are, see, as of the 6th of, well, that automatically updates the number of members. But that's one more thing that is really important to put on a member or the committee. It doesn't have to be the chair, but someone get assigned. Let's put an update in Rotary Club Central. Let's put an update of our information in our club resources. Let's make sure we're having at least quarterly a club assembly where we are reporting and actually have a written plan. Those things are all really, really important. So there are other questions right now or comments before I go on to meeting tips and techniques? Okay, I counted to 10. Okay, so then you should be seeing meeting tips and techniques. So I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a bit of a trend going on right now in some organizations where people are pushing for the 4-day work week. And I had an expert in this field present to one of my clients a little while ago, and so they're asking, like, what does this mean? Is that 4 days that you work 10 hours? And he's like, no. He said, well, how do companies do this and still be productive? They said, well, actually you do it by shrinking your meeting time. You do it by stopping certain meetings that are ineffective, and you do it by reducing email. And if you do those 3 things, people can do the exact amount of stuff they're doing now, but do it in 4 days. Now, I'm not suggesting anything revolutionary like that right now, but I am going to say that there's a lot of time in Rotary meetings where time is not well spent. So here are some tips. So you are an amazing meeting facilitator rather than creating death by meeting. So one is that the agenda needs to be sent out in advance. And it needs to be sent out in advance by ideally 2 or 3 days, maybe more. And that's based on, so I'm a social psychologist. So I'll tell you all based on social psychology. So half the world are introverts and half the world are extroverts. I'm an extrovert, so I think by talking. So I don't need, I should prepare for meetings, but put on any topic, I'll talk. But introverts need time to reflect. And they won't participate as actively in a meeting if they don't have time to think about the questions that we're going to be discussing. Also, the agenda should be put out early and in advance, because that means you got a plan. You figured out how much time you're going to spend on each item. You have an actual plan. The objectives of the meeting should be clearly articulated. When we started today, I said there were 4 things we were going to do. And so I said we're going to talk about how to have goals for committees, meeting tips and techniques, dealing with different styles of volunteers, and answering your questions. But likewise in your meeting, and the verbs are important. It shouldn't be we're going to discuss. We're going to get input on ways in which we could get more people out to next year's car rally. It could be, so that's an input item. We're going to decide what venue we're going to use for our barbecue. We are going to identify 3 steps we're going to take this month to improve our retention rate in our club. So your objective should either have an input or a decide, but you've really thought about it. By the end of that meeting, what have we accomplished? And those objectives are so important. I see so often in Rotary that people just bring out the same old agenda with the same old template and haven't actually thought about in this meeting, what are we trying to get done? So objectives are incredibly important. I haven't done it today, but I often will assign someone to be timekeeper who is not the chair. So that, and they aren't just timekeeper for the chair, it's for the whole room is responsible for staying on time. So that they can remind, if that item says we're going to spend 10 minutes, they can remind the group when we're at 5 minutes, 2 minutes and done on that agenda item. So having a timekeeper and showing that you're honoring people's times is incredibly important. The other thing is the only really 2 things you need to record are decisions and actions. So you can get one person to record that, or the chair can record that. And so it just says, here are the things we decided. Here are the actions. And with volunteers, what I often do is, instead of me stating all the actions, I go around the room and ask each person, can you state the action that you've committed to taking between now and the next meeting? If people say it, they're more likely to do it. And so I sometimes take that route instead of, and then at the end, if Carrie forgot one of the things, I might say, oh, Carrie, I think you were also going to update the flyer. Well, that's right, Anne. And so I add that in. Starting and ending meetings on time is really key to high meeting retention. Number 6, and we're going to go more into this in a moment, but 70 to 80% of the meeting should be either items that are for your input, so you're gathering up all sorts of ideas, or it's for your decision. The meeting should not be 70 to 80% of for your information. So you don't want to be going to a board meeting where each person is going around and telling us what was in their report. You want to have people ideally submit some of the key updates ahead. And utilize our others minutes and ask of the whole group here today, what ideas do you have that we could get a better uptake? A question that's for input, it was on the agenda. So I had time to prepare and know that that is a question that I'm going to be asked in the meeting, so I can come prepared. And I'll go more into this in a moment, but you do not need to decide everything by consensus. There's nothing wrong with voting. Almost always, the majority of where a vote would go, and consensus, the only difference is about 45 minutes. So to get 100% support, it takes 45 minutes longer than it does to go with the item that had the majority. And so if you do a couple of the other things I'm going to show you in a moment, well, you could vote on some items, and that's more than effective. So I'll lead into another point, and this I find to be incredibly helpful, is there's a difference between circle time and triangle time. So circle time we're having right now. So circle time is all ideas and questions are welcome. Want to hear everyone's different points of view. It doesn't matter how long you've been a Rotary or what your role is. And say, are there any other questions? It's circle time. Everyone can contribute and add. Okay. But Rotary, like organizations, can't run on circle time, even though some committee chairs try. It actually runs on triangle time. All organizations do. And so triangle means someone has to make the decision. And it should be the person with the greatest expertise, or it should be the person who's highest in the hierarchy makes the decision. So let's say I was getting input about different venues, and I got input from the committee about some of the key criteria. Then it doesn't need to be the whole committee that decides. It says if we're using that input, one person could decide, and long as you promise that it fits the filter and the criteria that we set. A lot of things get lost in meetings if you don't know who's going to decide what. Yes, there are some things that could be decided or should be decided as the whole committee, where it come back to voting and stuff. But there's a lot of things where the highest quality decisions by far and away in Rotary and in any other organization is when I have an item and I bring it for genuine circle time input. I'll say more about that in a moment, where I get the whole committee to, what are some things you think worked well last year when it came to how we greeted people when they came to our fundraiser? And what do you think didn't work so well? And then you jot down everyone's suggestion. You don't debate any of them. You just take them all down. And then the person who's in charge of greeting at our fundraiser this year goes away and is asked to come back. You come back with a plan of what you think are the 2 or 3 things you need to, that we're going to do differently. Not everyone has to decide everything, but everyone can input into the different items. So one of the rules is that in organizations, unstated, is if you have the triangle and you make the decision, at that moment, it's my job to follow. So before, when you're asking for ideas, anyone's welcome. But now that you've decided that we're going to do hybrid meetings going forward, then it's up to everyone now that if you have the right to make that decision, that if I like it or I don't, it's decisions made, time to follow along. That's being a good committee member or team member. So some mistakes that happen, and I'll just go through these and then I'll pause for some comments is, so first mistake that happens in a lot of committees is it's not clear what's circle and what's triangle and what's for your information. So sometimes the committee or the board spends 20 minutes talking about a for your information item. For your information item is code for triangle. Someone's already decided. You're just going to find out what that is and how you can support. So right beside the item, it should say for your information, code for triangle, for your input with a question, actual question that you want to get input on, or for your decision if it's something that the whole group needs to decide. So when you're planning out that agenda, you should have those things. A fourth variation from for your information, for your input, for your decision is for your action. It's a variation on for your information if something's been decided, but now we need to figure out who's going to post what, who's going to do what, etc. So mistakes that happen. So not being clear if it's circle or triangle, not identifying when the decision or who's going to make the decision, who has the triangle, or is it a group decision? Probably the one I see the most in organizations is fake circle time. So fake circle time means I already know that I want the venue to be this, but I'm going to bring it to the group and hopefully they'll all come up with the same thing as me. And then I can say I buy-in. Very dangerous. And so the person will then, yeah, but when other people offer in. There's a lot of fake circle time in meetings. You want to make sure that any item for input is not something you already know the answer to and you just want everyone to go, oh, that's great. You want to make sure it's an item to which you really don't yet have an answer and you'd like to hear the diversity of ideas and you write them all down and reflect on them before you decide. So related to that, one of the mistakes chairs and other leaders make is not being openly listening to suggestions. So debating, discussing, saying why an idea won't work are not effective if you've set aside 5 minutes to hear everyone's ideas. Another mistake that happens is that it really is circle time. So you've said, want to hear some ideas of what you think might be an alternative venue for the one we always use. And, with particular thinking about, some of our needs around accessibility and the fact that we want to have a band this year at our fundraiser as well. So it's got to be a room that manages that. So then people, well, what about X? Oh, okay, thank you. And I write that down. What about Y? And this is why I'm thinking Y. And then I write that down. What mistake that sometimes happens is now the whole committee decides they're going to decide the venue, when in fact it was one person's role. So don't let circle time input become a group decision-making. Honor it. That's great input. I'm going to take all those ideas back. I'll report at the next meeting where we're at. And related to that is if the person doesn't share, by the way, I took all your ideas. I have tentatively selected this. I'll look for the group to ratify the decision. The reason is because, Tom, you mentioned about acoustics and so forth. So I asked him about that. And, I got to say that, Bob, when you suggested this, that also really influenced some of my thinking. And so that's why I've come with this. So you show people how the input was used to make the decision or to drive the things forward. And when people hear their input was used, then they're more likely to want to input again. So that was a lot of information there. And so I want to go to a breakout in a moment where I'm going to get you to think about what's one thing you could do differently when chairing a meeting or a committee. But before we get there, are there any questions? I see something in the chat. I'm going to send this presentation. I'm going to put it in the chat so you can have it immediately. And we're also going to be posting on our district website. So happy to do that. Greg.
To make some comments because our club has had a lot of challenges dealing with this. The assumption is that everybody's on the same page. And the problem with humanity is we're not.
Right.
And so we've had in the past board meetings that like were 3 hours, 4 hours. Although we had an agenda, although we had consent agendas, although we had all the right stuff, the problem comes in discussion. And I come from a banking environment where it's a hierarchy and chain of command. And, I was a senior officer. And so I was in command in a number of things. In the volunteer world, that model is non-existent.
Well, it doesn't have to be non-existent, Craig. So you
Well,
can have very clear, what does the whole board decide, and very clear about what does the committee chair decide, but they get input from others.
Our issue was everybody had an opinion.
Right, and that's great.
And-
So that's how circle time works well. Everyone can have an opinion, but that doesn't mean you have a veto, and that doesn't mean
Agreed.
you decide. So the person has to show that they listen to all the opinions and they take them all in, but you have a time for input, and then later that person decides. But I think it's training your board, and we can talk more about it, but it's
Yeah.
around, there's a difference, and not every decision is made in the circle. That is not an effective way to proceed. Volunteer organizations need voting. You can't have consensus on everything. It's impossible.
Agreed, and we had constant votes. The problem is that people didn't support it, even though there was a vote.
Right.
That you're not going to get unanimity.
Right.
But the majority ruled. We move on. And
exactly,
we move on
and
to
that
the next.
needs to be in your club norms. And
It
so
is in our governance. It's in
Right.
it's in all our documents. But it's human nature, where some decide that that's not the case. That they don't agree with that approach. That the majority won, and we
Well,
move on. And we move
right.
on.
Well, I think there, and I know, Greg, you've got lots of things going on there. So I'm happy to take some of this offline.
Oh, that's
But
fine. I just wanted to point out that, the theory's great.
But the theory never works if you don't constantly reinforce it in action. So that's the point I was going to say, is if it's in the bylaws, we repeat, it's here, it says majority. So if you're not going to align with our bylaws, you're not going to align, then we need to deal with that. And perhaps you need to if it becomes really bad, move off the board. But it is very much only in theory if you don't constantly come back to it and use it as feedback of how we operate.
Appreciate it. Lord knows we tried.
Yeah, I know. So let me put you into some small groups right now. And the question is, what is one thing you could do differently when chairing a committee meeting, a meeting or a committee? Okay, so based on kind of what we've talked about so far. Yep.
Do you mind, Anne, if I just kind of follow Greg's thing? Because if you think you were in a hierarchical world, Greg, I was in the military before, so I get what you're saying. And
You got me beat for sure, Jim, for sure.
Huh?
You have me beat for sure.
I believe as a new member to Rotary, and from that background, that somehow or another it's crept into our thinking that majority decision making is a bad thing. That the only way to go is consensus, because Lord help us, we wouldn't want to lose a member or have a member kind of think badly of where we're going, or that his ideas aren't accepted. I don't know, Anne, is this idea of consensus decision making, is that a Rotary norm or a Rotary goal?
No. What is a Rotary norm or goal is to make sure people have input, which is circle, followed by a triangle decision, which could be one person or it could be by vote. It's happened in organizations as well, as it's gone crazy in terms of everyone thinking everything has to be by consensus. I spent a lot of time showing people, if you want to get things done highly effective, you genuinely listen to all the input, but you got to move forward and you got to make a decision. Now, there are a couple techniques I can go into for how to make since it's coming up, I'll show you one way to make a consensus decision that'll work. But let me first let you go into small groups, because that's also a very effective way to get things done. So I'll let you go into small groups. And the question is, what is one thing you could do differently when sharing a meeting? So I want to get to an action. What's one thing you could do differently when sharing a meeting? So I'll open the rooms now. So I didn't have how to do a consensus decision-making plan for this, but you gave me time while you're in the breakout to go and grab my slides on that. So as say, people do what they're rewarded for. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you put it back in the chat? Because when I was out of the room, it's not in the chat. So it just needs to be in now that we're all in.
I wondered about that. So
Okay.
thank you. I will do that in a second. Thanks so much. So, you know, as we say, people do what they're rewarded for. So teaching people to get back to, we vote and we move forward and we are team one and we honor our decisions is really important. But if you have something that really needs to be decided by consensus, then the only process that I found that works is something called using yellow, red, green, and sorry, you can't see the word there, flags. So this is my system if it has to be decided by consensus, okay? So step one, you put forth the recommendation. So I recommend that our fundraiser this year is a car rally, okay? Then you ask, are there any yellow flags? And with a yellow flag, you must complete the following sentence. I could support this if. So I could support this if we reevaluate at the end, if in fact it worked to engage more non-Rotarians in this fundraising event versus others. I could support it if we pick a date that's another month out, because I think we need a lot of timing. We've never done one of these. I've almost never, and I'm worked in as a consultant for 25 years, a professional facilitator, I've almost never had 2 yellow flags that conflict. I have had, well, I want us to evaluate this work in 3 months or 6 months, so we cut it off at 4 months, and we agree. But anyways, you gather all the yellow flags. I could support this if. And so now you say, okay, yellow flags noted, you've actually literally captured them. So now I say, this is the recommendations. We're going to go forward with this, but we'll evaluate it in 3 months to see if it brought out some more non-members. We will slow it down and go with, have another month out. So we'll go with June instead of May. And so now I say, are there any red flags? And red flags are welcome. Absolutely welcome. But if you have a red flag, you have to work offline with someone who has a green flag, supports this, and come back to the group with a new recommendation. So you just close it there, red flag, no problem. Okay, so Louise, with your red flag, can you work with Brandon who brought this recommendation forward? And next week, can you guys bring back a new recommendation that you both can agree to? And you must come back with something you're going to agree to. And so it's okay to be a no, but you got to take responsibility if you're a no, and you come back. So once you've done that, and let's say it comes back, then you go through the same process again. So we have a refined recommendation. Thanks again, Brandon and Louise, for doing that. Let's outline it. They'll explain why they think it's a good idea. I go through and I do yellow flags, and I could support this if. Are there any red flags? And then I say a show of hands of all those green flags. And at that point, you should have all hands forward. So that's the only one that I've ever found that works for consensus, but please don't make all decisions by consensus. Please, if you do really genuine circle time and you listen to all the input, and the person who makes, if the group votes or the person who makes the decision shares how the input influenced them and why they couldn't necessarily accommodate all the ideas, your club after a while will start moving faster and will not run into quite so many troubles.
Question, did you say 4 flags? I wrote down 3. So I'm like,
3. No, so it's yellow.
Yeah.
I can support this if. Red, I gotta go, and then green.
Okay.
And that's the order that you go in as well.
Thanks. Okay.
Great, yeah, great.
Right, Red, the red flag timeout. It's a great idea. I wish we had done more of that.
I think it would have helped you guys. Yeah.
The cool off period. What has to happen is people get very passionate in meetings, and because it's something they believe in. Also includes, diversity inclusion. The whole issue right now is I'm not being heard. You're not listening to me, right? Inclusion has to be there. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has an equal. This is Rotary. Everybody has an equal voice. So you need to be heard and want to be heard. And so you need to give them the opportunity to be heard.
That's why when you go to make a decision, it's better to have circle input. And then maybe at the next meeting or whatever, the person comes back with the triangle decision. If it's a complicated issue and you ask for circle input and at the end of it, I go, okay, well, what we're gonna do is this. Well, you probably had already decided then. You really weren't listening in the slightest. You
The
gotta make
red,
sure it's genuine circle input.
yes, the red flag and time frame to consider and kind of everyone's a, you know, type A decision maker. We need to make the decision right now.
Right.
All right.
And you don't. It's just the extroverts that want to do that. But again, having a plan on it is good.
Greg,
So I wanted to go to one other thing about different kinds of volunteers and how to motivate them. But
Could I comment
before I do that, are there any other just quick questions here?
could I comment on what Greg just said?
Sure.
Okay, one thing that he brought up is you're not listening. That I remember raising my children. You're not listening to them, to me, was equal to you're not agreeing with me. So I hear that a lot from many people, that you're not listening to me if I'm not agreeing with you. So one thing I always found very helpful is this, okay, this is what I'm hearing you say, and this is your reasoning. And then I understand that. I understand your reasoning. And so if you reiterate what they have already said, that sometimes helps with that, your transition to, yes, I did hear you, and I did, and hear and listen are two different things too.
That's right. Yeah.
So if you can reiterate what somebody's saying, and I said, that's a valid concern, and you validate it.
Yeah. And if you can, after you make the decision, say why you couldn't go with a couple of the ideas. That also helps. But again, I have to say almost every time, circle time doesn't mean veto. So we are going to listen, we're going to reflect, but ultimately, you know, it's got to be decided, and either gets decided by the person with the greatest expertise or who's in charge of that area, or it goes to a vote, or in some rare cases, bring it using the yellow, red, and green flags. Okay, let me just go on to the other element, and then we can open it up for a couple more questions. So there's tons I could share with you about motivating different types of volunteers, but I thought I would go with one in particular that I think is fairly practical, and I will try before the end to even just this element give you a one-pager on it, so you have it as well. But most of us are motivated by 2 or 3 characteristics. So I'm going to go through 8, and I want you to try and think about what ones you're motivated by. But when you're in a committee, you got to assume you have people that are motivated by things that are different than you. So you have to lead with that in mind. So what am I referring to? So of the 8, and I'm going to go through all 8. So 1 is achievement oriented. Greg, you said a lot of type A's. Yes, there's a lot of people in Rotary that are motivated by achievement, probably more than the average population. So people that are motivated by achievement want to see the goal met, or they want to be competent, or they want to see they're going to get a club citation, or they want to raise more money than they did the last time. And they also just want to see things get done. So again, you have an action plan with things checked off, a list where you can cross things off. People who are achievement want to see progress. They want to see competence. They want to see achievement. So that is where you give them some, you know, make sure that the group has specific and measurable goals. You get them to give them some opportunities to take it to the next level. Why don't you go and check that out at the district level, or at different things like that. So that's for achievement. And I say there's more achievement oriented than some places. But there's also lots of people that are motivated by affiliation. So affiliation is, I really love to be part of the Rotary Club of Norfolk Sunrise. I really like to be known for my Rotary wheel and my Rotary scarf and show that. I want to be associated and accepted by the group. So people that are motivated by affiliation, they love to do things like maybe be the new member buddy for someone who can help kind of mentor them along. Maybe they are the one who goes and gets opinions from different people outside the group. Some people just love to represent the committee or represent the team and to go to other clubs and share some of those different things. And so thinking about that, I'll give you a concrete example. It involves my children. I have 2 boys, and they both play rugby, and they both at different times or different ages tried out for the Ontario rugby team. And my child, who's motivated by achievement, came back and said, that is the most awesome coach, Mom, I have ever been around. I would love to be on this team. He was fantastic. I said, why was he fantastic? He said, oh my goodness, well, he's determined that we're going to win the Canadian Championship. We're going to beat British Columbia, which we haven't done in 5 years. In order to do that, he has a really intense plan that we're going to follow. And you know what? He's not just going to play everyone. He's only going to play the best. So you got to be on the best to be on the field. So my other son goes, tries out, comes back. That's the worst coach I've ever seen. Same coach. Why is that? So my son, motivated by affiliation, he said he didn't want any of the socials. We're not going to do a club picture, that we're not going to go and do the other. And there were all things about social and just being together and stuff. He said he's even not going to play everyone. We all want to belong. We want everyone to be part of it. So the same style worked for someone who's motivated by achievement, but didn't work for my son, motivated by affiliation. That son went on to play rugby at Queen's, not on the first team, and he became the club photographer, which made him very happy. And he also organized the rugby party. And he was happy as could be because he'd found some ways to meet his need for affiliation. Some people are motivated by autonomy, committees of one, and otherwise, and they love it. I just want to go on my own, and I want to go through and figure out who's given the foundation, who hasn't, and I'm going to call up or do something for some of the people that haven't, and I don't want to have to work with a whole bunch of other people, and that's fine. Or maybe the person's motivated by autonomy, so they can go off and do their task and then come back to the committee and report on the task. So when you have a one-pager, which I'm going to share with you, you can literally actually ask people, what are your 2 or 3? I'm sure as I'm going through, you're thinking about which ones are yours. But you got to sort of manage with this in mind. Some people are motivated by creativity. So if you say, boy, I'd like you to come up with a new flyer for our fundraising event, something we've never done before, and so forth. The person's motivated by autonomy. They might love that. I want you to come up with 3 new ways we could communicate. That isn't just by email, that we could use voice memo, video, whatever. You come back with some ready for us to try some of them. So giving the person who loves creativity that role. The 5th one is responsibility. This is one of mine. So someone says, Anne, you're responsible for facilitating a session on getting things done. I will be there because they said responsible. My kindergarten teacher said Anne is conscientious. That's another code for this is one of mine. So someone says that's what you are responsible for doing. And so all you have to do is introduce the word responsible into the sentence, and I will pay a little bit more attention. So again, I could use business ones, but since it's a bit more Rotary, I'll use family ones. So again, my 2 sons, one motivated by responsibility, one motivated by creativity, same task. I need you to lock up, make sure the lights are off, the alarm is on, and the front door is locked when you go to leave for school, if I had gone ahead of time when they're teenagers. For the kid that is motivated by responsibility, I'd say, Carmichael, it is your responsibility to make sure that this week it's your responsibility to make sure that the house is locked up, the lights are off, the alarm's on. If it was Alistair's week, I'd say, Alistair, you're responsible. I want you to make sure the house is, the 3 key things. And you know what? I want you to come up with a new and interesting place to hide that spare key that we've never hid it before. Now, he was the only child who needed to use the spare key because the rest of us are motivated by responsibility. And we would, of course, have our key. But nonetheless, he loved it. He loved his job because he knew that he got to do the fun part. Number 6 is recognition. So some people are motivated by recognition and they want someone at the club meeting to say what they did, or they want someone to send them a note, or they want to somehow or other be told that they added value. And so taking some time, even a committee, and say, let's go around and say one thing we appreciated about each person here in terms of how they've helped us with this task of improving our club website. And so creating some time for some recognition is important. Status. Some people are motivated by status, and it's not all bad. It can be that I am the charter member of the club. That's a form of status. I remember when I was in another club before my one now, and it was the 90th anniversary. And I was president for the 90th anniversary. And one of the older members came up to me and said, I was president when it was the 50th. And I was like astonished. I thought, for 40 years, you've been here as past president, going, boy, I'd do that differently. And I was so impressed at that status. My husband's motivated by status, and status means I'm the only person who has this. So he does a type of geotechnical engineering. He loves being the only person in Canada that has this test or that. That's status for him. The last one is security. So some people like things to be the same. So I remember cautioning a president-elect who had like 10 great ideas for change. I said, you got to tell the club the 5 things you're going to keep the same, because otherwise you're going to freak out the people who are motivated by security, because they don't want to hear about change. They want to hear about same. So again, being able to be aware of that. So that is very, very helpful, I find, is that because we tend to lead the way we want to be led, but it's actually a misnomer, because then we'll only focus in on the motivators that we have and not the motivators that others have. So let me open up to some questions or comments about that in terms of the different motivators. Okay, nothing per se. Then I'm going to give you a chance then in a different breakout room for about 7 minutes, talk with the others around, as I went through that, and I'll just put the 1 pager in right now so you have it. Sorry, give me half a second. If I can do this really quickly. I'll put the names of the 8 motivators in the breakout room in the chat, and I'll make sure I get the 1 pager for you while you're in the breakout room. So I want you to chat about what are 2 or 3 of your motivators, and what is a task that you have been assigned in Rotary where someone really fed your one of your motivators. So maybe it was your achievement oriented and someone gave you the goal of net 3 new members and you love that. Or you're affiliation oriented and you were you helped with the onboarding process for new members. So what's a time that someone's done something that really spoke to one of your motivators? That's the question at hand. So here we go. You should do it randomly, but hopefully it will create some new rooms. And so here we go. How you doing, Carrie?
I'm great, Ann. How are you?
Good. Did you get any good tips from that in terms of?
Yes. Oh, yes. I love the session. And then Kathy and I just had a lovely chat.
Good.
Did we lose everybody else?
Very candid about our club.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, and Ann, I'm sorry, I need to leave because I have to go to Toronto for my nephew's first communion. So
Wonderful. Enjoy.
Yes.
Enjoy.
Yes. Well, I gotta love Zoom. I can change my clothes while I'm still listening. So
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
You can know
Turn
how to
off
get
the
things
video.
done, girl.
all right, have a great day.
Video off.
Thanks. Okay, and I'm just going to put in the chat the 8 motivators, but we've got about 10 minutes most left. So let me just open it up with either comments or questions that people want to make, either about the motivators or coming back to other questions about getting things done.
And
Yes, Bob.
being a non-techie person that I am, is there any simple way I can print all this information you gave off just through an email or something like that?
Sure. I can email you, Bob, the 8 motivators that's on 1 page.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay, great. I'll do
And
that.
does that include the part on circle versus triangle leadership?
Well, I'll send you the slides as well, and you can print it with more than 1 slide per page so that it doesn't use up all your ink.
Okay.
Okay, and
That would be just wonderful.
Okay, great. I'll do that. And for the rest, I have put the 8 motivators, so just put them now in the chat. So hopefully you can get that. It's on 1 page. So other questions, comments, questions first?
I might offer a comment just from the discussion in our little breakout room was two of us had things where we felt that was great value for us to have contributed, and yet they didn't fit neatly into your 8 categories. So like, I think it's probably not so so easily defined as that. We in the military, we used to call it situational leadership, just sort of adapting to the group around you. And, you know, for example, I'll just speak for myself. I really valued that somebody asked me to do community service in our club. And yet I couldn't find the nice, neat category in which to put that in your listing of 8. So I think it's kind of getting to know people.
Absolutely.
It's all interpersonal. And if you categorize it too much, you stand the business of making it very kind of digital, computer-like. So
Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do here, but at the end of the day, it's really the adaptation of people and people's needs and that kind of thing. And we're getting away from that by doing it here on screens like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Jim. And, you know, the most important thing is, as you say, the situation, that you don't just lead based on what works for you, but you lead based on what works for others and taking the time to figure that out. Couldn't agree more. Great. So then why don't we just go around and just say what's one idea that came out of either your small group discussions or the presentation that you think you're going to take forward and try and utilize going forward. And if you don't have one, you can say pass, or instead change it into asking a question. So why don't I start with, if I can, start with you, Greg, and then go to Nancy and then go to Bob. Greg, what's one
Okay.
idea?
Well, for me, personally, I think it's the red flag, timeout, compartmentalize something and come back to us with a solution. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Okay.
We're results oriented types. We like to get it done and do it now. We've discussed it. Now we're gonna, you know, we've discussed it all. Now we can vote. But there may be a time to reflect and come back and just again take a time out for the next meeting and we'll deal with it then. So
Okay, great.
that's something for me to
Yeah.
take to heart.
Okay, great. Nancy, and then Bob, and then Sheila.
I think what I'm carrying away is when you listen to people around the meeting table express their views and opinions, trying to understand that they're not just saying no, they're kind of interpreting it from their own kind of motivational background, and maybe hearing them a little bit more positively than I have in the past.
Okay, fair enough. Bob, and then Sheila, and then Kathleen.
Well, I came out of a teaching background with a history teacher where there was a lot of discussion and not too many conclusions drawn. So my natural way to go in was into the circular type of discussion. And when I became president, that was what I used. And if I had heard your presentation, Ann, at the time I became president, I would have run a lot more efficient board meetings.
Okay, well, good. And thank you. Jim was making a suggestion that maybe Marcel and I combine around governance. And so that's a great idea for the future. How about you, Sheila? What's one idea or insight you're going to take from today? And then we'll go to Kathleen and Louise.
Thank you. Well, I'm really thinking all day today about how these principles apply not only in Rotary membership, but every area of our lives. And one thing that is speaking to me today is the idea of having a lot of clarity around whether a specific issue is one that should be decided by one person, by a vote, or by consensus, and being clear on that at the outset.
Great. That's a great one. Kathleen, then we'll go to Louise, and then we'll go to George.
I always enjoy hearing things that give me a perspective, different perspective, or a different way to organize my thoughts about things. My specialty was language learning disabilities. And so I've always had to think in terms of that everybody learns the same. What I am presenting is not going to be taken exactly the same way as I intended. And that it's great to get ideas and to think of different perspectives, but also remember that never to put these categories into set jars that cannot be, because, and especially some people do not want to be categorized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Louise, George, Jennifer, and Kathy. Louise.
So I found the whole session, Anne, very, very informative. I like the triangle circle aspect, especially doing the board to be effective and considering time and to move things right along. I find the board meetings, there's always a lot of stuff to discuss. So, and also the flags.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
Great. George?
There we go. I use the green, yellow, red now, but from discussions this morning and listening to your presentation, I've made a couple of notes about how to improve that, how I'm using it. So that's been that's been good for me. The consensus versus vote. We just listen to a lawyer telling us do everything by consensus, and then we come back to the reality check is really that there's room for both, but there are times when you do need to have a vote, and as treasurer, I need a vote. I have to be able to move ahead or stop. Consensus sometimes just doesn't work for the treasurer's role.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I know Marcel and I differ on that point.
But all good this morning. Lots of learning, lots of new learnings. So that for me is
what are you taking away?
That's going to take away.
Okay, Jennifer and then Kathy.
Yeah, I thought that was a great presentation and very thought-provoking. Lots of great things, and I'm going to recommend that actually everybody, share this deck with my board. But I think the biggest sort of takeaway for me is that I really enjoyed hearing the timekeeper on each agenda item, and because it might not, it might seem not brash, but I always thought that was a good idea to do that. But I'm glad that somebody, like you recommended that, because I think in the long run, it does honor people's time and respectful of people's time. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And Kathy, last word to you.
So I appreciate all of that. Actually, everybody brought up some very good points there, and I'll go to assisting in meetings, and my personality is last minute, everything else. And I didn't realize that an introvert needed that material ahead of time to think about it, or they wouldn't participate in a meeting as much. I never thought about that at all, because that's not my personality. I can read it while we're going and chit chat about it. So that was huge for me, that to try to get those agendas, etc., out in plenty of time for those introverts to absorb and create their opinion and discussion points.
That's great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, the other half will appreciate that.
Yes.
So in terms of honoring time, I'll honor your time. I'm going to give you've got about 4 to 5 minutes. So we go back to the plenary, the original link that we used this morning. But thank you, everyone. And if you do have any other questions, you can just reach out to me. I'm always happy to answer them. Just give me a couple days to answer them, but I will answer them. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks,
Thank you, Anne.
Good presentation,
Thank
Anne.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, Anne.
Bye.